Next, CityNet 30 takes you downtown for the weekly luncheon meeting of the City Club of Portland. Live weekly coverage of City Club is produced through the facilities of Portland Cable Access. Now we join the City Club for this week's program.
I'm Harriet Watson, President of the City Club of Portland, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to this very special event in Portland's living room to talk about plans for Portland's new kitchen and pantry. Today's special event was made possible thanks to the assistance, support, hard work, and sponsorship of many people, some of them in this tent with us today, others very much still behind the scenes. All contributors are listed on the sign adjacent to the podium and at the entrance, but I'd like to give a special public thank you to our major sponsors: Association for Portland Progress, Northwest Natural, Pioneer Courthouse Square, the Hilton Hotel, the Sheraton Portland Airport Hotel, Portland's Farmers Market, Greg Higgins of Higgins Restaurant and other members of the Chefs Collaborative, Paul Ornstein of South Park Restaurant, Philip Boulot of the Heathman Hotel and Restaurant. Thanks to you all, and a special thank you to City Club staff who have put in countless hours for this to be happening today. Next week, on Friday, May 18th, please join us for a special program focusing on the present and future plans for Portland's parks. This will feature City Commissioner Jim Francesconi, and it will be at the Multnomah Athletic Club. Please note the change in venue. And, as always, you can have the most current information about club events and activities by going online at www.pdxcityclub.org. Our board host today is Patty Tillett, who will be joining us from the floor to ask his question. Patty is president-elect of the City Club and principal with Zimmer Gunzel Frasca Architects. He will ask the first question of our speakers. Following Patty's question, we will open the program to questions from City Club members in the audience. Please line up behind the microphone even before Patty is finished so that we have time for as many questions as possible. Please identify yourself as a member of City Club, and please ask your question in 30 seconds or less. If there's no one behind you and there's still time, you may ask a follow-up question. Otherwise, after your question, please step aside from the microphone. Broadcast of City Club programs this quarter is made possible in part by corporate underwriting from Kaiser Permanente Health System, Wells Fargo Bank, and Portland General Electric. We are very grateful for their ongoing support. This is literally a fabulous day. It also marks a fabulous moment in the life of the city during this 150th anniversary year. And it's also an important day in the life of the City Club of Portland, reinforcing the role of the City Club throughout its 85-year history as the place where the community comes together to talk about what Portland is and what it might become. Sort of a public market of ideas. I also want to thank the program committee for unwittingly bringing such remarkable symmetry to my year as president. Last year at this time, I was still reeling from a sensory explosion, having just experienced the sights and sounds and smells of the public markets of Paris and the hill towns of Tuscany. That experience gave me an opportunity to observe and think about the social ecology of markets. People seem to take real pleasure in what we too often think of as the quotidian of daily life. The pace was slower, but there was a sense of invigoration and vibrancy. People were actually visiting with one another, and perhaps most striking, there seemed to be a real appreciation for quality. We all know that public markets do much more than strengthen local economies. They revitalize communities and help reconnect the vital social pieces that exist in the urban landscape. In their broadest sense, public markets bring value to a community because they bring together different cultures and tastes and ideas. Today's distinguished panel will explore all of these things and, I'm told, reveal some surprises as well. Portland City Commissioner Charlie Hales will lead off the program, followed in turn by his Chief of Staff and renowned foodie, Ron Paul, Harris Hoffman, former President of the Board of Seattle's Pike Place Market, and Len Pickell, noted food and wine authority and President of the James Beard Foundation in New York City. Charlie?
It's tempting to say, why spoil a meal this good and a day this fine with a speech from me? You might applaud, so I won't say it, but what a wonderful day. And I have another few acknowledgments I'd like to make, but I want to start, of course, with these three seemingly calm-looking gentlemen here. I want us to say bravo to Greg Higgins, Paul Ornstein, and Philippe Bonneau for this wonderful luncheon. Gentlemen, Philippe, Paul, Greg, thank you. So should we eat like this at City Club every week? How about it? Thank you very much, gentlemen. I also want to thank my colleague, Commissioner Dan Saltzman, who's here. Nobody has been more persuasive and persistent about the need for a sustainable Portland than Dan. Thanks for joining us here today, Dan Saltzman. And thanks to Pioneer Courthouse Square. Their president, Greg Goodman, is here. Their executive director, Karen Whitman, thank you. This is what public squares are for. Thank you very much for hosting us today. Starting back in the 1840s, settlers started working their way across a difficult, unarable landscape to the Oregon country, a land of bounty and promise, and first of all, agriculture. Now, they built a port city there, and generations since those days have worked to make this a better place for us to live, for us to farm, for us to trade, and for us all to prosper. That work continues now and has continued in our generation. And I say what we're about here now in Portland as we build on that legacy is trying to create the best European city in America. What do I mean by that? I mean a rich variety of places and choices. Places like this and choices like these. A place, and we've worked hard at this in the last couple of decades, where there are great parks and community centers, where the city has a connection not only with agriculture, but also with nature. A place of arts and culture. Think of what we've done to expand and improve the arts scene in our city in the last couple of decades. Just up this street behind us, think about what Broadway was like 20 years ago and what it's like today. Look out the side here. Think about what transportation was like in Portland 20 years ago and what it's like today. As we sit here today, we are moving concrete and earth to build light rail tracks on Interstate Avenue. We're finishing the last bricks of the stations on Airport Light Rail, and we're unloading 3 more streetcars off a ship 8 o'clock tomorrow morning. So we've done good things in this community to build on that legacy of place. But there's more to do. There's no commissioner of public spaces in Portland. We have commissioners in charge of parks and of water and sewer services and streets and police and so on, but we do not have a commissioner of piazzas and public spaces and gathering places. But yet a great city is more than private residences and parks and commercial establishments and the streets which connect them. It's also gathering places and civic space, the public realm. This square is the realization of that idea, and it's clear that one such place is not enough. Now, I like to compare Seattle to Portland, don't we all? We love to brag, but we want to borrow an idea from Seattle, the public market, and improve on it. But in comparing Portland to Seattle, it's important to note the difference in character between the two cities. Seattle likes to build monuments that say, "Here we are, world, we're on the map," like the Space Needle or the Frank Gehry Museum. We like to build things for us. We tore down a parking lot and put up paradise on this square. We tore up a freeway and put in a park on the waterfront. We didn't do that to get on the cover of magazines. We did it to make it a better place for us to live. Of course, other people come here and notice these things, and some of them move here, and some of them invest here, but that's not the point. We're doing this for us. That's the Portland way. Another part of the Portland way is a tradition of public-private leadership. We've learned to rely on our citizens in order to make the city work. We have a long history of using nonprofit organizations to take an idea that may be founded in one of those partnerships and carry it on and make it work and run it as a community enterprise. Think about all the great places that we love in our community. The Pittock Mansion, the Japanese Garden, the Chinese Garden, the rhododendron and rose gardens. The rhodey garden's beautiful this time of year. Go have a look. The streetcar line itself will be run by a nonprofit organization, and of course this space works, not because of the bricks and the trees, but because of an organization that puts life and activity in here, Pioneer Courthouse Square. That tradition of using nonprofit organizations is part of our history and part of our character. So I say this idea of a public market fits in Portland. It fits into Portland's history of connecting to a bountiful land. It fits into Portland's character as the best European city in America, and it fits into Portland's habit of using public-private partnerships to create and sustain the best loved places in our community. I'm proud of that history. I like that character, and I believe that history of partnership serves us very well. And there's one more thing that serves us very well. One of the things I love about Portland is you can be a citizen here, you can be a community leader here, you can be someone from a neighborhood with a good idea here and say, why don't we get together and, you've heard that sentence before, you've been involved in those kind of projects before. We're open to new ideas and new leadership here, and I'm so glad we have that leadership in our community. And here comes a man who is the living proof of that ideal. Here's a guy who had a great idea for Portland, and he's here to tell you more about it. Please welcome someone I'm very proud to call my partner, Ron Paul. Thank you.
Thank you. It's great to be here. It's great to work with a civic entrepreneur. And Charlie, you're a public sector entrepreneur extraordinaire. I also want to thank Philippe and Greg and Paul for just transforming what otherwise would have been a wonderful day into even a better one. And to acknowledge Philippe especially for having just won the James Beard Foundation's award as one of the country's best chefs. And you know, that's not just a feather in Philippe's cap. That's a feather, as he's quick to point out, in the cap of Portland and the region. And without the farmers, the producers, the quality of food that we can call our own, we would not have the likes of these three gentlemen who could produce the likes of what we are eating for lunch today. It's an incredible gift, and we need to figure out the best ways to harness that. As Harriet mentioned, and as Karen Whitman is always telling us, this is Portland's living room. And we're embarking on a project, an opportunity, a challenge to build the next, and I would argue most important room in the city, and that's our kitchen and pantry. And I say that knowing, after years of helping others entertain, that when you have a party, everyone's going to be in the kitchen anyway. And Karen, I don't expect that that's going to impact things here, but that I know we will have another civic space that we can call our own. But really, what is a public market? Some would say that it's a farmer's market on steroids, but that really isn't what a true public market is. It embraces the growers, it embraces everything that farmers markets have contributed and continue to contribute, but it creates a more permanent sense of place. Farmers markets and public markets cannot exist without each other. And as Harris Hoffman, our next speaker, will talk about, the relationship in Seattle, especially between farmers markets and Pike Place markets. It's a false dichotomy to think that it's a one or the other. We're excited about the success of the farmers markets in the neighborhoods of Portland. We look forward to creating the opportunity of working more closely with them and providing the growers that you see out here with yet another venue for being able to share their wealth with us. How has this project gotten started? Well, about 20 months ago, when I first joined Charlie's staff and recognized that a dream of many of us in the food community of having a market to call our own could only be realized by public involvement. So doing what Portland does best, we met. We had a meeting, albeit with typically better food than most City Hall meetings, and we started talking about how can we create a public market. And we did two things. First, we went around the room of 20-some of us sitting there and just invited, in fact, I'll invite you to go through the same exercise that we did. And that's to think in your travels, in your life, of public markets, be it in our neighboring cities of Seattle and Vancouver or elsewhere in the world. Think about those markets that are memorable. What about them stand out for you? Is it the sights? You know, looking out, you can begin to, you don't have to imagine today. We have it right here. Is it the smells? Is it the textures? Is it that certain chaos quotient that every good market has? It just can't be too orderly. It can't be too pristine. Think about those markets and think about the connection that they provide. They provide a sense of place. So we went around the room, and what everyone shared was radically different from the person before them, with one common denominator, though, that thread through all the comments. And that was that the sense of being in community was so much greater in a public market than in any other community setting. You could go into your neighborhood supermarket that sold many of the same things, but would you have that same sense of community? No. A public market creates the intersection of place and community with the essentials of daily life, wonderful food that we have. The other thing that our committee did was to look backwards. And we thought, well, this is a good idea, but what's happened in Portland before? And Kim McCall, who's in the audience, certainly knows the history of public markets in Portland, perhaps far better than I. But we did some research with the help of George Igo at the Oregon Historical Society and learned not only has there been a long tradition of public markets in Portland since our founding in the mid-1800s, but the rest of the country, Seattle included, would often visit us to find out how we're doing it. Why can Portland create public markets and others are fumbling to catch up with us? So armed with history that had one of the greatest markets 2 blocks away on Yamhill between 1st and 5th with hundreds of vendors who sold their wares daily. And I'm not going to even though I'm tempted to, give you a history lesson on public markets, but there are reading materials, and we will have a quiz at next week's session. Under your plates, each of you have a shopping bag that we want to encourage you to use at the farmer's market. Inside the shopping bag, you'll find a synopsis of the history that we put together. And believe me, it makes great midnight reading if you're at all interested in Portland, if you're all interested in food. It comes together in a fascinating way. So with that sense of history, we began to talk about how we can create the type of place that integrates farm and community, that integrates the fisheries and the lamb and the beef and the poultry producers, that integrate the sheep and goat herders who make cheese. And we came up with a step-by-step approach to talk about what type of program a public market would have. And again, this is in the formative stage, but it was very important because we needed to talk about what a public market was long before we talked about where. Now, everyone's first question, be it the media that was corralling us earlier today, or John and Joan Q. Citizen on the street, where is this going to be? Well, it's going to be where it belongs. How many of us, when we walked into Pioneer Courthouse Square today, thought that this was a parking lot that was reclaimed? I mean, we know it's Pioneer Square because it feels like the center of the city. The market, when it is built, is going to feel like it has always been here. It's going to be the missing link that goes back to 1941, which was the last time that Portland had a true public market, and it will connect us to that history. But you see, I'm begging the question too, and I'm not going to, I know in Patty's first question, he'll say, well, Ron, where's it going to be if you're not going to tell us in your opening remarks? So I'll give you the three final locations that we're working on analyzing. The Central Fire Station on Ankeny Square, across from the New Market Theater building, which was one of the sites of the very earliest market, is certainly a very prime location. So is the old post office, built in 1916 at 511 Northwest Broadway. It's unfortunate that in its wisdom, the federal government has chosen to resurface what had been the northernmost park block into a surface parking lot, and were that to be the site, it would also include reclaiming that parking lot as open space and trying to work in enticing the next level of collaboration that we have with the Portland Farmers Market to create a home for them. The third site is on the east side, the home of the Italian markets for many generations on Southeast Belmont between 10th and 11th. All of these sites have many characteristics in common. The key element that we're looking at, though, is that the development of a public market has to catalyze a market district. It is not a building alone. You know, Pioneer Square doesn't have just Pioneer Square. It has the buildings that radiate from it and reflect back on it. And the same is true with a public market. It has to be transit friendly. In my office, if it weren't, I wouldn't be here, let me tell you. It has to be pedestrian and bike friendly. It has to have parking to serve the needs of the vendors as well as the customers. It has to have the density of residential and office uses that will create the vibrancy, the verve that we need. All of the sites offer all those characteristics and more. We will be working during the next 3 to 4 months in further analysis and hope to have the recommendation that we can offer to you, our citizens of Portland, in the fall with a preferred site. That doesn't slow us down, though, in terms of the work that we're doing, the collaborations that we're building, especially as Len Pickell will tell us, with the James Beard Foundation, and finally reconnecting with his culinary spirit and having a way of honoring him locally. Yes, this is a project that costs money. The word public is in the public market for a reason. There are three legs of a financial stool that are very important, and they all involve you. One is the public's need to build it, and to build it in such a way that it is debt-free. The second leg is the vendors, be they the farmers outside or be they the year-round merchants inside, need to pay the rents that support the market. The third, and equally as important element, is the role of private philanthropy, you, me, and those around us, in being able to support those parts of the market that the vendors, through what we want to keep as reasonable rents, would not be able to otherwise support. The strongest markets in the country have found a way to make those three legs of the stool work, and we are learning a lot from our brethren in public markets around the country. So how is this an important project for Portland? I think Harriet talked about the vibrancy and the fact that when she's traveled, it just overwhelms you. Well, that's part of it. The other part, though, is that we made an investment in land use planning over 20 years ago that created an urban growth boundary that was designed to support farming outside of the urban center. Those farms are being squeezed daily. Commodity pricing, when you grow your products for only one source, and that's buying it at pennies on your efforts, is not a fair equation. The reason that this is so important is that it connects the theme of the urban growth boundary with the practice of supporting local agriculture and other food products. It creates the type of jobs both in the city and on the farms that we talk about but do precious little to actually seek happen. It connects the producer and the consumer. You know, what's great about food is that we eat many times a day and we need to shop for our food. We have fallen prey to the perils of shrink wrap convenience. And it's time to go from shrink wrap to unwrapped and to really understand the connection that we all can make with our food. I invite all of you to accept the challenge and the opportunity of joining with us in creating what I would argue is the best room of the house, our kitchen, the public market for Portland. Thanks. Thank you, Harris Hoffman.
Adjustments here. Thank you very much. This is a spectacular location. It's a wonderful day. If you can order up a day like this, you certainly ought to be able to start a market. It's a pleasure to be here and to have the opportunity to share with you some of my experiences with public markets and public development projects similar to this. Well, I was invited here because of my experience as director of the Pike Place Market. There are some other relevant aspects of my past that I sort of share with you. My first experience in the food business was starting a co-op in Iowa City. I was the first manager, and it was Don Mazziotti's vision to start a food co-op. He is your newly appointed director of the Portland Development Commission. So he has some experience, and I'm sure, I don't know if he's here today, but you can call on him for your support. He really, even back then, understood some of that. We recently renewed our friendship, and he came up to Seattle, and we noted that the old co-op that we started was still there, bigger. They were doing a little bit of infighting, having some of the little political struggles that successful places doing, but they had continued to grow. Also, when I got back to my office, people asked me if he had recognized me. I told him I saw a friend I hadn't seen in 30 years, if he had recognized when he saw me. And my comment was that, well, back when he knew me, I had hair down to my shoulders and a beard, so I wondered whether or not he might have recognized me. Those were the days. And for the record, Don looks exactly as he did 30 years ago. During my 4 years as executive director of Pike Place Market, I hosted people from around the country and the world who were in awe of what Seattle had created. And the Pike Place Market in Seattle truly is considered the soul of Seattle. There's nothing that you can do within that environment that people aren't interested in. But as you may know or may not know, a quarter of a century ago, the market was on the verge of destruction. It was in a state of disrepair, and there was an effort by the city officials at that point to actually tear it down as part of urban renewal and put it on top of a new parking garage that was going to exist downtown. It basically took an act of will from a committed group of people and a public vote, and that turned the tide, and the market at that point was the beginning of being saved. It also took tons of public and private support. I'll talk a little bit more about that later. Since I worked at the market, pardon my provincialism, we call it the market. I guess people from New York City call it the city. But at any rate, we have had the opportunity, and I've had the opportunity to talk to many people. I've visited many places, and people have asked me to speak about public markets and starting markets. And mostly, that is something that I dread. Mostly places don't have the advantages that Seattle had. It had the water. It had an operating market and a tradition of an operating market and a downtown at that point that was coming back to life. And lots of other places that I visited really just haven't had that. But I am particularly excited to be here today to support your efforts. My wife grew up in Portland, and during the last 20 years of living in Seattle, I have visited the city over and over, and as a result have come to understand a little bit about the differences between our towns. There's so many features that Portland has that Seattleites do envy, in fact, and we're aware of them, as Commissioner Hales stated. Your block sizes are just the right size. We're meeting today, I didn't actually know it was a parking lot, but in this incredible square, you've been able to set up some vendors and farmers and get a sense of what it's like to be here. And I've been here many times when there are events going on. Pearl District is one of the great residential neighborhoods, and it probably was impossible to think about when I first started coming here 20 years ago that that would turn into that kind of a residential neighborhood. And then could anyone have imagined that it would be that great? Yesterday I rode your Max out to Orenco Station, and as we struggle in Seattle trying to create a light rail system, we really are amazed at what you were able to do here. So you've been incredibly successful. All the things you've created here could not have happened without some common elements. Much like, it's sort of presumptuous for me to do that, but considering the chefs and our other panelists here, much like the raw ingredients needed to create a delicious meal. You've got to have a commitment to a vision, and you're lucky to have both Commissioner Hale and Ron Paul and all of you who showed up today and all the people that I've been getting emails and incredible amount of meeting time that has gone into just getting you to this place. And there will be obstacles. There'll be incredible and inevitable obstacles. But you have to have the ability to follow through, and then you also have both public and private support, and that's financial support. I think Ron illustrated very effectively what it's going to take in order to make it work. This is not something that the private sector can do. It is something that needs to be a cooperative effort between the private and public sector. But Portland has already demonstrated the ability to mix these ingredients, and it's now exciting to think that they'll be creating a new meal of bringing a public market perhaps back to downtown. And my mother-in-law told me when she was a kid she used to shop in a market downtown, so I don't you really are bringing it back. You have a tradition. Portland has had a tradition. In Seattle, the Pike Place Market succeeded because of the commitment of the citizens and, like I said before, tons of money. At some point, after Warren Magnuson had funneled in literally tens of millions of federal money, one of those fellow senators turned to him and said, "Maggie, that must be some market you have there in Seattle." And I think for those of you who remember our two senior senators, and there was a little bit of hostility as Washington was so successful at funneling money, maybe over the objections of your two esteemed senators at that time. The other thing that is important is obviously a right location. There is no one location. I believe you have an opportunity to really look at your variety of locations. The proper mix of tenants are also needed. And another thing that Ron talked about was this mix of farmers and other merchants and high stallers. And it's interesting. In Seattle, when people, the reverence for the farmers is crucial. It's meet the producer is what it was all about. But it clearly is not just a farmer's market. It is a market where, depending on how naive some of the customers are, they might come up and see a mango from the high stallers and wonder where it was grown, or a grapefruit in March. But in fact, it is that blend, and it's not without any tension between people who sell produce that they're able to get from all over the world year-round and the farmers who are producing it. But it is that blend and mixing that really creates a vital place for people to be and shop. And you've got to have access to public parking and also, as talked about, public transportation as well. But public parking is a crucial issue. It is for everybody. I'm in the real estate business. We don't ever start any project without thinking about parking. So why bother? I mean, it sounds like such a pain. And unlike 25 years ago, supermarkets today are much better than they were there, and they're much better equipped to handle consumer needs. There's food courts. There's incredible restaurateurs that have started that just didn't exist 25 years ago. But they also provide a wide access to these things. But a public market is different, and I won't go over all the things other people have gone over before, but what you're able to do in a public market and the feeling people have going there and the opportunity to meet the producer is significantly enhanced experience over shopping in any of the other places. And both Seattle and Portland are lucky enough to be located in the midst of a rich array of agricultural abundance, both on sea and land, and you're able to take full advantage of that. And a more intangible element in the public market, however, is the flavor and blend created by mixing the small merchants, each of whom are committed to producing and selling their products. That's exactly the delicious meal that you're able to have, and the meal we've been able to have here today is symbolic of that, I think. But like your light rail, Pioneer Courthouse Square, and the Pearl District, making a vision for the public market reality can't happen by itself. A market has to have the ability to add to your city in a way, and it does have that ability in the way that the other partnerships and the other things you've done over the years have. And I visit Portland often, and whenever I come here, I just mutter at how well you've done some of those things. And I am envious of the planning and the follow-through that you've exhibited in doing them. But I'm always happy to return to Seattle and shop at our Pike Place Market. And I expect to visit here in several years and have the ability to shop at yours. Thank you very much. I'm going to turn it over to Len.
Hi, I am Len Pickell, president of the James Beard Foundation, and quite honored to be asked to be here today. And I would like to first say how lucky you are. This is my first trip to Portland, and what a fantastic city, exciting city, and just so beautiful. You are all so blessed. And we are so honored at the prospect of possibly naming this new public market after James Beard, one of your native sons. The Beard Foundation was founded shortly after the death of James Beard in 1986, and its mission statement is a very simple one sentence, and that is to promote the culinary arts in America alongside the other fine arts. Something that is expected in Europe. This is a natural. In this country, this is something that we have to strive for, and we're getting there. And the idea of incorporating James Beard into your market, I think, would be an incredible testament to his legacy and would also much deserved for Portland. The early readings and the early writings of Mr. Beard, we read about him at the market, at the stalls with his mother, selecting vegetables, and even then, such a plethora of choices that he had. And I think it would be incredible to bring that back in this day and age as another element to make this city so much more exciting and have so much more diversity. We're we have agreed, speaking with Ron Paul, we will be bringing some James Beard Foundation award-winning chefs from around the country to Portland on October 21st to do a fundraising dinner, which will be the first step in our commitment to supporting this market. All the funds raised will go toward an account that will be there for the market as the need arises. Usually the Beard Foundation, this particular dinner is called the Dinner of the Decade series. And in the past we have partnered with a cultural partner in another city. We started in Chicago in 1991 with the Ravinia Festival as a partner. Then we went to in New Orleans with the Children's Museum in New Orleans. Then on to Houston with the Society of Performing Arts. San Francisco with the San Francisco Symphony. Philadelphia with the Academy of Vocal Arts. Then we moved to our next city, actually was New York City, where the Roundabout Theater was a partner. And then Dallas with the Fort Worth Dallas Ballet. So it's quite exciting that our Dinner of the Decade 2001 will be in Portland, and all of the funds raised, usually this is a 50-50 split between the Beard Foundation and the organization in that city. However, our commitment to this project, we will be donating 100% of the funds raised. And I think that Mr. Beard would be honored to know that his hometown, is looking to promote his legacy, and we are very excited to be a part of it, and I wish you all the best with this project. Thank you very much.
Paddy Tillett, City Club member. Before asking my question, I'd like to say how delighted we are to hear your news about the James Beard dinner. That is the most tremendous gift to the city and enormously appreciated. You spoke...
Louder, Paddy. Just get close to the mic.
Are we on? Yes, we are. You spoke about the importance, Ron, of integrating the market with its surroundings, and I agree with that absolutely, just as this square works. And you also spoke about the enormous importance of the regional produce that makes the whole thing possible. It seems we have all of the ingredients to make a market work really well. But I know that you're also very hard-headed about the way you look at this prospect, and you've been looking at other markets around the country that haven't made it. Can you speak maybe a little about some of the pitfalls that we need to look out for? And I have a second question, which is particularly for Ron. Come clean and tell us where it's going to be.
Right. For those who didn't hear the first part of Patty's question, wanting to know what the pitfalls of public markets are, I'll share the microphone with Harris on this, since I know that he's often asked in his travels around the country to comment on a whole variety of public markets. One of the initial elements is debt. We have many projects in Portland that we can look at and understand that debt service has really, if not created an insurmountable burden, has certainly altered their way of doing business. So the key impediment that other markets face have often been having to service debt at the same time they're operating a market. The connection to consumers and growers is the other pitfall. In 1931, Portland built the Seawall Market along the waterfront. It closed by 1942. The prime reason that it did was that the vendors were very reluctant to leave Yamhill 2 blocks away from us. And they did not want to move from Yamhill, where they had stalls that had been run by their family for generations, into a new market that was farther away from their customer base. We want to listen, we want to learn, not only from the successes, but from those that haven't succeeded. And no, Patty, I won't tell you where it's going to be. Do you have anything?
No.
Hi, Lily Lettuce, City Club member, and this is for Charlie Hales. Did you realize Oh, did you realize the importance of the market would play in promoting good health for Portland citizens, since you are what you eat? A diet of fruits and vegetables can cure major health problems like cholesterol, high cholesterol. Were you aware of how Hales and hearty we would all become?
Oh, my. Thank you, Lily Lettuce, and I like your agricultural outfit there, too. Lily, you're right. Actually, there's some things about Oregon that I'm proud of. We're 50th among the states, Oregon is, in theme park attendance. I think we should celebrate that last place. In the Center for Disease Control's look at how overweight Americans are, we're actually in the middle of the pack there, bad pun. We're not actually the best there. And one thing that they have noticed in those studies is that cities where there's lots of transit, people walk more. Where they walk more, they're more fit. So I think, again, the Oregon emphasis on health and fitness fits with the market as well. I think you're right that now, particularly with all the emphasis on cancer research here at Oregon Health and Sciences University, and with Oregonians' orientation towards the land and fitness, that this is a health issue as well. So perhaps we can get some doctors to come to that big, expensive banquet. Who's next with a question?
Perhaps, Nikki Lynch, member, perhaps you could describe a little more maybe of the process, and I mean, is there a standing committee, and how is that brought together, and where are we in that scope?
The process began more informally than formally to test the waters. Since then, we have established an open policy of inviting community members to participate, and it's as easy as calling the commissioner's office to be alerted to meetings. What we have done is have a large task force that has dealt with the more global issues, assigned smaller task forces and committees to do operations and management, fundraising research, site selection research, and then that information is pooled back to the larger committee. It is an open process, admirably run by Marcy McAnally from Herbsworks.
Nikki, one thing I might add to that, you were involved in the whole Parks Bond Measure campaign. This is really the stage of this work where we're inviting people to participate, and where, I think, as you've noticed, we haven't figured it all out yet. It may be customary in some public ventures to wait until all the T's are crossed and all the dollars are found before we come to this kind of forum and announce it, but that's not this kind of thing. And in fact, it's not how Pioneer Courthouse Square was built, or how the streetcar was built, or how the Chinese garden were built. Each of those, we went to the community, or some community leaders reached out to the rest of us and said, let's try this, can you help? And that's why we're here today. So if it looks like we haven't figured everything out, it's true. Jane.
Hi, Jane C., City Club member. I think this is a really great idea, but one of the things that sort of rumbles around underneath unasked is, what about my Hollywood Market or other places, or Sheridan's or places like that? Those, I think, are the fears that maybe people have, and I'd like to have somebody answer that so we can help with the success instead of a fear thing.
I'm going to ask Harris to first comment on Seattle, and then I'd be happy to follow up. Thanks, Jane.
Well, it's actually amazing in Seattle how much the Pike Place Market has positively affected everyone's food awareness in the entire city. And there are more small markets, both farmers markets and other kinds of markets, specialty markets, by a huge factor than there were back when the market wasn't functioning very well. So a couple of things have happened. One is people's awareness have been raised. Two is shopping at the market is one kind of experience going down there, and shopping at a neighborhood market is another type of experience. But as people get more connected to the notion that the shrink wrap, whatever and unwrapping the shrink, or then providing more opportunities. Really, the Seattle example is that they magnified quite a bit, multiplied.
And our intent is to look at the bridges and the synergy that we can achieve by working with the farmers markets throughout the region. And it has been a goal from the beginning, and it is undiminished.
People are passing to me. I don't know why. I have a couple questions. The first one, anybody can take and answer briefly. I noticed that. Am I still too far away? Okay. The first question is, Seattle's had a run of bad luck. They've lost Boeing to Chicago and A-Rod to Texas. I was wondering if there's any chance. Yeah, I was just wondering if there's any chance we can steal those guys that throw the fish from the Pike Street Market. I'm trying to visualize this market, and my only real point of reference is Pike Street Market, and those businesses seem pretty well established. They've been there for years. How is this going? I mean, are these people, those people really aren't growers, are they? I mean, how are the growers going to interact with the public at this market rather than the farmers market?
There are three parts to the market program. One is those that you typically see at a Pike Place Market, which are the year-round vendors. There's the opportunity to join forces with the farmers market to have contiguous outdoor space that will provide a seasonal home for the growers and their efforts that are contiguous, physically contiguous with the public market. And then there's a third, literally a bridge, a transition area that would link the two so that during the off-season, that those farmers who have product, the cheese producer, anyone on an ad hoc basis who couldn't participate in a farmer's market because it wasn't happening, would have a venue to come to and be able to offer their wares. So you have those three parts that sort of span what the consumer needs are. The year-round vendors are always going to be selling lemons. Use that as a great example. I don't care how long it's going to take for global warming. It's going to be hard for us to grow a lemon here and put it on that fresh fish that you just got at the market. And so we're committed to understanding the needs of shoppers, and that those types of trans-seasonal produce should and would be available. But that's not to the exclusion of the local growers. It's to add convenience, but not to diminish what the opportunities are.
Guinevere Milius, City Club member. You've studiously avoided discussing the particular sites and naming a site or even any favored site. My question is this. There are three sites. There are interests from various neighborhood associations and merchants associations in each of those sites. Can you talk about the challenges that are facing these sites, and which I think might be leading to why we don't know today where we're going to be? Can we know a little bit more about what's facing each of these facilities so that if there's some lobbying to be done, we can do it intelligently?
Lobbying is welcome. Let me start, and Ron may want to add more. We're circumspect about the location, both because all three have, as Ron described, have strengths and weaknesses and difficulties. Actually, the city only owns one of those three sites. The one that we own isn't, by the way, the most feasible of the three. So all three have difficulties. So lobbying and ideas and suggestions for how to move forward on any one is very welcome. Secondly, we're also being a little vague about location because it may turn out that as we get into those difficulties, a site that looks feasible turns out not to be. And you might recall that we made some fairly late in the game changes in the route of the streetcar because of some of those issues. So it's often the case in a public project like this that if you preserve a little flexibility, the obstacle becomes something that you get over rather than something that stops you. So I think actually taking this careful approach of devising the program first and selecting the site second is both the right way to proceed and strategically smart when things get tough later on. You want to add anything to that?
The other is our having husbanded the public resources to do qualitative work in the scope that we could accomplish. We worked from an initial $45,000 Portland Development Commission agreement and have leveraged that by this point over 1-to-1 with private contributions and pro bono work to get us through to this day. We will be doing more of the architectural and engineering, soil analysis, and market studies on the 3 sites during the next fiscal year, and will continue this process of involving the public as we go forth.
Hello, Corleen Kraft, City Club member. I'm interested in the vendors. I wonder if you could amplify a little bit on how you reach them, particularly trans-seasonal vendors, the lemons. Where do we get those? And what does it cost them to participate? Do they purchase space on a per square foot basis? Or I'd just be interested if you could amplify on that whole aspect. Thank you.
I mean, I can talk to you about how we've done that in Seattle, and maybe that would be different here, maybe it'd be some similarities. The people, any of the merchants who are there all year round would be and are in Seattle, have permanent spaces, and they pay on a per square foot basis. Again, it was crucial, and it is crucial in sort of stimulating people who are able to have that kind. It's much harder to sell at a public market, whether you're a farmer or whether you're a permanent vendor, because of all the complications having to do with getting produce there. It's much higher labor costs, and so, but that people need a permanent location and need to be there on a basis. For the farmers, some farmers come every day, and some farmers come 3 times a week. And so the way it's done in Seattle is done, farmers always have first priority on certain amount of the space. And they come and they pretty much know where they're going to be every day. And if they don't show up one day, then that's fine. Somebody else can take that space. But over time in Seattle, it's a fairly elaborate system that has come to being. And then sort of the second tier citizens in Seattle have always been the craftspeople, which may or may not be part of a market you do here. And they pay on a daily basis, which is a very inexpensive rate in the farmers market. So they've had a dual system, clearly trying to figure out how to get farmers and to stimulate farmers and to work with farm programs is a major part of any program, I think, if you're going to be successful.
The only addition to that is that our operations and management task force has been researching about 20 markets around the country and is looking at best practices and will weave together some recommendations.
Carolyn Timmerman, City Club member. Portland has a great Saturday market. Is there any reason why you can't combine these and where they can help each other?
Portland does have a great Saturday market, and it's an institution that is thriving and is a potential partner in the market, in that many other cities that have successful public markets have a continuous balancing act of what portion of crafts versus what portion of foods. So wherever we are, we will be a partner. The demography and the customer base for Saturday market and the public market would overlap, but would they be coincident enough to have that be an overriding site selection criterion? And we're looking at that. That's a question, not an answer. And we recognize the strength and the history of Saturday market and want to build upon that.
Chris Smith, club member. Usually at this point in the program, there's a long line of people to ask questions, and we know we're going to run out of time. That's not the case today, and I think it's because this is such a great idea. There are not a lot of things to pick at in this, so I'm going to ask the question, how can all of us here help advance the cause of this project?
What a great last question. Thank you, Chris. My theory is that meal was so good nobody wants to move. This really is the kind of venture, as we've all said, where it will happen because it's a Portland kind of thing and because a lot of people get on board. You know, 6 years ago, we didn't have a streetcar line and we didn't know how to pay for it.